Hey folks, in this episode we talk to Ryan Hopkins, co-founder and head of marketing at Trigger Media, a digital agency based in Dublin. You can hear about starting Trigger Media, the journey from the original inception of the company, which was a really interesting story about how they started as one company that lacked some clarity of purpose and required a rebranding and a refocusing of the team and the company on the offerings that they have. We also hear Ryan discuss his first foray into entrepreneurship at a small scale. I thought it was a really interesting story. So I hope you learned something and enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Albert. In this show, I talk about technology, building a company as a CTO and co-founder, and have guests to discuss their roles in technology and entrepreneurship. Today, we're joined by Ryan Hopkins, co-founder and head of marketing at Trigger Media. Thank you for joining us, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So can you tell me a bit about yourself and starting Trigger Media?
Yeah, so I suppose in the grand scheme of things, started Trigger Media, previously Trigger Movement, in around the age of 25. Prior to that, I'd done the usual thing in Ireland, which is leave school, go on to third level education. I did an undergraduate in venture management, which strangely enough was changed to entrepreneurship in my third year, which is a little bit, I'm going to describe as fluffy to begin with, because at the end of it, you're a qualified entrepreneur. It makes kind of no major sense. But they did that. I understand why they did that from a marketing perspective. It made sense for them. But it was like many business degrees with the kind of creative and entrepreneurial side things of business plans and stuff like that, like a module thrown in every year. I did a internship in my third year, and it's actually where digital marketing became a big part of my life, was the fact that I did that internship and kind of got a bug for it. I was like, oh, I like this. This kind of gives me a creative space, but it also brings in the business element, which also interested me. It kind of gave me validation that I was kind of going in the right direction of what I wanted to do, because I was enjoying it, which is a massive part of what you do in college. To be honest, it's important to figure out whether or not you made the right step in what you're studying and stuff like that. So I then went on to study a master's in digital marketing in Dublin here in DCU. Yet again, just wanted to take it up a level, and I knew I probably wouldn't want to go back to full-time education if I moved away from that. So I went and got that done. And then straight out of that, I went into work for Facebook. Might be controversial to say, but it bored the living daylights out of me.
Really?
Yeah. It was a very operational role. Very simply like policy based, just decisions that you can make in your sleep sort of stuff. People coming in with inquiries, you going back. But it was actually very, very good. I'll be really brutally honest about it. It was very good to get Facebook on the CV. It caught eyes, and it got me into my next job, which was in Web Summit, which is a large tech conference that was previously based in Dublin and now is in Lisbon, which was very, very like you're thrown in the deep end, which was great at that time. You have to learn fast and learn on the go, which was brilliant. And it was with some really, really smart people, to be honest. I enjoyed the time. It was stressful at times because you are thrown in that deep end, but, no, Web Summit was brilliant for me. And then it kind of got to a stage where that idea of running a business kind of itched at me. I thought about it. And I think a lot of the time, especially in the last, 10 years, entrepreneurial things or like a lot of people are interested in that side of things. It's kind of, can't find a better word for it. It's kind of sexy almost sort of thing. People find it cool to now be an entrepreneur. probably not knowing what comes with it realistically. So, so basically I had that kind of, it was always in my head, and did I ever really know when I was going to make that step? No, I definitely didn't. But I was thinking about it all the time. And then a friend of mine came to me he's come from a completely different field, kind of in a leadership, business strategy, kind of coaching that area. And he kind of started up his own thing, actually coming from a sports side of stuff. And basically what we ended up doing was trying to set up a consultancy, which was Trigger Movement. And it just became actually quite impossible to market after a while. So that's where the original business idea came from. I took the leap after Web Summit to go, do you know what? If I'm going to do it, I should do it now while you can. While I'm young, I don't have a huge amount of responsibilities in relation to a wife or kids or stuff like that. Responsibilities to my girlfriend. But after that, there's not a huge amount. You know, I can come and go when I want and do what I needed to do, sort of thing. So I was like, perfect timing. Let's do it. So we started up Trigger Movement and tried to move things along we were trying to, what we called it at the time was disrupt consultancy, which was actually terminology that caught a few eyes and people were interested in that. Just even that as a tagline kind of was interesting to people. I'm not particularly sure why. There's certain reasons I've been given over time why it was interesting, but maybe it's because, like, I'm speaking to you currently in a hoodie and a t-shirt and a pair of runners. So maybe it was because I was saying consultancy and people would not associate with me as a consultant. So, so it was, myself and my original business partner. We kind of took that forward. It was interesting though, because we kind of broke things down into, it was 4 silos. It was web development and digital marketing, which was going to be my area to control and own. And, business strategy and coaching was going to be my original business partner, Stephen's area. And as a small business, it's very hard to market yourself as a consultancy that does this variety of things, but they're not all interlinked. People just expect when it's a small company that everything's interwoven. And it wasn't at all. So it was kind of funny when we would be just the two of us, we'd be in a room and, we'd be talking about, because it was only the two of us. But I was Stephen's support and he was my support. So having a conversation with someone who wants to talk about marketing, who's wondering who Stephen was, or if we were discussing leadership with someone, why am I in the room, sort of thing. It became quite apparent, not quickly, but in the grand scheme of things, quite quickly evident that it was going to be hard to market ourselves. People would always ask questions of, oh, what's this thing you're doing? You're building my website, but what's this thing you're doing on this? I'm like, no. Ignore that. That's nothing got to do with what we're doing. So people would always ask those questions. And if you're the likes of Accenture or one of the big consultancy firms, it's fine. You guys have the revenue and the resources available to buy your way into sectors. Whereas building it from the ground up is quite hard. They will have gone in as financial services companies and then they've gone into other very profitable areas like digital and tech and stuff like that. Whereas, we were going to struggle to do it, basically. So that's kind of where it started from. And then it's developed over the last 3 years into Trigger Media, which I'm sure I can go into a little bit more in a few.
Yeah. So how far back did it go that you wanted to start something? Was it after college or was it even before that?
Yeah, it was probably a good bit before that. I think we live in an age where there's entrepreneurs that are spoken about and people will hate me for mentioning, but Gary Vaynerchuk is one that's often mentioned. He seems to rile a lot of people up, whether good or bad. Yeah. I think he has his positives and his negatives. Genuinely, it sits somewhere in between the two. But no, it didn't. I didn't have a lemonade stand when I was a kid, but as I grew up, one of my biggest influences, if not the biggest influence, is my dad. And he always explained he was a very good salesman himself. And he discussed the idea of the freedom of which he would love to have owned his own business. He never pushed anything or said anything, but he didn't really have to. I kind of knew by him that he was like, he would have loved probably that freedom to make those decisions and maybe not kind of have to go up the ladder and down the ladder and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I I suppose it was maybe nurtured a little bit while I was in my teens and I thought about it. And then from a sporting perspective, I've always played sports since I was younger, and I, the odd time would voice my opinion and say things. So I would like to take on captaincy roles and stuff like that. So maybe as my personality developed and confidence grew, I liked being the person making the decisions. Whether or not that's the right or wrong ones. But yeah, it was one of those things as a kid, as a teenager, realistically, I started to develop more and more. And then, like, there's even funny stories of going away on a J1 visa, which is the Irish student visa to America, where we pretend we're going over for work experience and to develop relationships, and no one believes that and no one thinks that in Ireland realistically. But, you go over to America for a summer and you work, and I was going over to Chicago at the time. I was 21, and, I suppose this is my version of the entrepreneurial story, the funny one, the one where usually people say lemonade stands or sell, I think the one in America is baseball cards or whatever it may be. But for me, this was my funny story, which was we made an email address called j1ireland@yahoo.com. It wasn't even a proper URL for a company, but we emailed the popular area for Irish students, all the bars around there, all the Irish bars, of course, because why would we go anywhere else when we're in a different country? And we emailed saying, hey, we're two Irish students, but we have this company. It was not a company. But we'd love to set up Irish events for your bar, and we'd get Irish students into it by selling through the Facebook groups that were created for the specific trip. So, we got one bar to bite back. It's now a Starbucks. Funny enough, it's everything a Starbucks now, but, it's right beside Wrigley Field. Literally a stone's throw from Wrigley Field. And they came back to us. It was called O'Malley's. And they said, yeah, we'd be interested. Basically what we wanted to do was put on 3 events. There was, the group stages of the European football championships were on, and we had burgled our way into it, and, we were going to be playing Spain and all this sort of stuff. So they said, let's do one and we'll go from there. So myself and a friend of mine, John, did it, and we promoted it throughout the Facebook group. So we got there, and we set it up. We'd brought flags over and bunting and a few silly Irish things, and the bar was huge. We didn't realize how big the bar was. It was massive. We were going to struggle to fill this place, but if we get 30 people in, then we've done our job. 30 people are there at the start, and we're delighted. We immediately go to the bar. We're nearly celebrating already. We've got 30 people in. We said that we'd do. We'd done our usual bit on Facebook to promote it. But typically, weirdly enough, the game starts, and as Irish comes, 200 people come flooding in the door 5 minutes into the game. And it was absolutely insane. So it was kind of, because it was at the start of the trip, no one knew where to go or what to do. And we knew that would be the case. Like, as in that's not retrospective, where some people will say things like, oh, we knew that was the case. Well, everyone was asking the question of where we should go and what we should do. So we were lucky in that sense that we just fell upon people asking that question, and we were just like, come here. And we'd make really awful promotional posters and put them in the group. And, it turned out, the owner's son comes over, his name is Sean O'Malley, comes over to me and just goes, yeah, we're doing this again. Great. So that ran for the inevitable only 3 games, the European Championships that we were going to play. So, we did that, and that kind of got us into the bar. We ended up working in the bar and doing that sort of stuff because we had set up events. So we did it a few more times throughout the summer, and that was just our one kind of a bit silly, but kind of dipping your toe into kind of putting yourself out there as running something, and kind of feeling the heat of, oh my God, we're doing this sort of thing. It's the closest story that I have. It's nothing major, but it was maybe my first dip of the toe, in the water. Prior to that, or even just after that, there wasn't really anything, from a, setting up a business perspective or doing anything inevitably or inherently like that, so. Yeah, so that was that funny story. So maybe it counts, maybe it doesn't. I have no idea, but it's the story that I've told, and actually, weirdly enough, in interviews and stuff, which Whether it went down well or not, who knows? But it seemed to work, maybe.
That's fantastic. I love that. So what kind of clients are you working with at Trigger Media?
Now what Trigger Media is, just to give context to people, it's this full service digital agency. I think, it's basically we're specialists in technology, creative and marketing, all of which are all very much interlinked. I think over the last while, some people separate them, which is fine because you find specialists in those areas. That's all well and good. But I think there's often the case with clients, they want to come to one trusted point of contact and say, can you solve this issue? And generally the issue is as broad as digital. It's the term they'll use. It's not very specific, but I know what they mean when they say it because that's all they've been taught is, oh, this is a digital transformation or whatever way you want to, you put it, jargon, whatever it is. But people come to you with an issue, which is, I'm struggling with my website. I'm also struggling with content I'm probably struggling with marketing, which inevitably means I struggle with content, and there's often the accountability goes across 3 or 4 different suppliers, and therefore the buck doesn't stop with 1, it stops with 4. And therefore it means that everyone's probably going to say they're doing quite a good job. Not always, but some will always say that they're doing something right, but maybe the client's sitting in the middle then with 4 different reports, but the results aren't providing what they need. And there's something inevitably wrong there, you can't have 4 people saying they're doing the job right and yet the result's not happening. So I think that's a difficulty for clients. That's what I've learned over the last 3 years is that they kind of want to come for 1, 2, 3 solutions because across those 3 areas, because they don't know who to turn to, or they've previously been told everything is great and the results don't seem to speak that way. So at least it is where our clients can come to us. The buck stops with us. They call us and they can get an answer to that question, whether it's good or bad. At least the question's coming to someone who can answer the question around what are their website visits to their costs to X, Y, and Z, So, so from our client perspective, it's really varied, especially from the old business model to the new one. We've had the likes of charities, to insurance companies, to sport, like national sports shops and stuff like that. So it's completely varied, and people have asked, have you specialized in one area or not? And no, we haven't. I'll be brutally honest, but I don't think it's necessarily what we want to do. I think there's fundamentals in probably technology and in marketing that can be implemented across the board, no matter what sector you're in. Obviously, if you're talking about healthcare or you're talking about specific industries, there are stuff that you need to learn and be good at. But there's also the case where you just have to get the simple things right. And I think there's been some basic stuff missed over the last few years, and people sold a few duds. That we've had a lot of clients come to us saying, look, these are the issues that we've had over the last 5 years. Whether it be a web development company costing just to change or put in a blog or whatever it may be, because they built a system that's nearly impossible to navigate. So our clients vary from so those clients, Boher was one charity, to Intersport Elveries, to Robertson Lowe, the insurance company, and stuff like that. So it goes across sectors, and even sizing, like we build websites for tiny startups, to that insurance company, to like national non-profit organizations and stuff like that. So there's no real trend to it other than looking at what their fundamental issue is, and generally it goes across 2 of our verticals. It's, our website and our marketing are not in good places. Can you help us? So that's where the trend comes. But no, not across. There's no like industry specific or company specific, demographics that we're going after now.
Sure. That all makes sense. Are there any specific elements other than like the overly complicated web system for updating that's costing too much money that you're seeing as issues that are common among?
Yeah. So, they're not necessarily the exact same, but there is some definite like consistencies, and it's generally around custom CMS builds. Some websites need to be built on a custom CMS because what they're asking people to do is just complicated. But 90% of websites, that's not a definitive data point. Like I'm completely making that number up, but I would make a decent guess at it, and it's not very fair to do, but it is what it is. But the dominant amount of websites that are created can be created not with a custom CMS. There are platforms out there made for it. We specialize in WordPress, but we have built-in craft. Some people use Magento, whoever it may be. Those systems are built there to make things a little bit easier. And we put a lot of work in, especially if it's a smaller company. We'll do a lot of work with it from an education perspective. They'll constantly be talking, I'm not a techie, I won't be able to do this. And so trust me, you will be able to do this. All you're looking to do is add a blog or edit something like a case study or add a case study, whatever it may be. We can work with them and just showing them how to do it. And then they don't have to come back to us just because they need to make the smallest edit. That's fundamentally wrong, especially in a world that technology is so easy to use at times, obviously. But yeah, the consistency is providing people a website or platform that they don't necessarily need. They think that, well, actually, to be honest, they probably don't even realize that they don't need it. They might need to be educated on, look, you don't need this. What's the actual fundamental business goal? And therefore, what's the marketing goal? And therefore, this is the solution that needs to be provided. I think it's here's this shiny thing in the corner that's going to cost you 55K. But you don't actually really need it, to be honest. So, that's where the consistency is are people being provided the thing that they require and need to achieve the goal they want at a cost effective price? Like some websites need to be 55K, let's say, or 300K, whatever it may be. But not all of them do. Yeah. And I think there's kind of we're just going to charge you 50K because we're a big web development company. It's like, yeah, but you're doing this in your sleep and you don't even, it won't take a huge amount of time. You might be, if that's the case, don't even deal with that client size if you're going to do that. I'm only 3 years in business and maybe it's my naivety or youth, or I don't know what it is, but it just, there's a morality or ethics to that. And it feels strange that if you charge a small business owner, 25K for what's going to be a 4-page website. Yeah. There's something fundamentally wrong there. So, I'd like to think that's something that I'll continue to bring into the business and continue to make sure is always going to be the case because, I think people are going to become a little bit more aware of what's actually happening, I think, over the next while. Cause I think there's just been a bit of cloud put in the industry or something because we've just seen it so consistently, people coming to us with that same issue. Like, we've got this custom thing and it takes 10 days to get something sorted. You're like, 10 days for what? We had to change a box. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. Yeah, we can do a better job. So yeah, that's probably the consistency.
From the marketing focus on the types of things that your clients are having issues with, like as in content placement and ads and things like that. What sort of things are you seeing that are not what you would expect that clients are coming to for you to help fix, or at least that maybe was missed out on?
It's a good question. It's kind of small things, small, simple things. I may come across in this talk and other marketing. God knows they're probably calling themselves gurus on Twitter and stuff like that. But,
professional, a marketing.
We'll say, the proper marketing professional may hear this and I may constantly go back to the simple things and the basics and stuff like that. But I do genuinely believe that they are the things that are often the first mistake people make, and we go to the really heavily complicated first. It's realistically why the business model that we do now at the moment, because it means that if I was to run an advertising campaign for someone, no matter who it is, and I'm trying to push people through from whether it's B2B or B2C. So B2B from a lead generation perspective, let's say it's for an insurance company to e-commerce sales. If their website's really, really poor and I'm trying to push advertising budget at it, and I don't first at least give the warning, if they say we're not investing in the website at the moment, we need to figure ways around that's fine. We have to figure ways around that. That's one of our issues then. But if somebody's not providing that advice of, guys, we're going to be throwing money at a marketing budget to a website that's not necessarily doing the payment correctly. Are you capable of doing PayPal, Apple Pay, whatever it may be, those simple things that can be implemented, or even simple content, as in, are you taking the time to create content that's actually of some use? Does it provide the narrative that you need to do? Are you actually providing a goal to each type of narrative? i.e., are you trying to sell? Is the point of what you're doing? Are you trying to sell, or are you trying to brand awareness? Or is it what is the actual point to this thing? I think that's where the biggest issues are coming from, is from fundamentally sprinting to the finish line, trying to do the really heavily complicated before you even got the basics correct. I think people have presumed, well, we did the website 3 years ago, so we're just going to do this ridiculously complicated, integrated with every system that we have but then your website may be out of date, so there's kind of this back and forth where they need to understand that you constantly need to move moving things forward in order to get the best out of things, as in make the investment, but know that the platform is there to do it, don't just throw money at an issue. It's just not going to work, as in, I mean, advertising money at an issue, it's just, it may work in the short term and it might give you that little boost in sales, but in the long term, it may not work. You're not going to survive if your point of contact, which is your website, isn't working correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So that's probably the main thing from a marketing perspective, is the simple, maybe it's the education side of it. It is explaining to people, look, this is great. We're delighted that you're coming to us to work with us on content and your advertising, but your website's not working. Or that's great that you have X amount of budget per month. That's a brilliant budget, but you want to use a lot of stock photos and stuff. But we could create this, let's say, video advertisement, whatever it may be, in various different formats, depending on how they want to use it, whether across social media or whether it's a display or whatever it is. But I think it's kind of making sure that you go from one box to the other, right? What's this? People will use the term funnel yet again. I'm kind of falling into this buzzword bingo sort of side of things, but it's that idea of, have you got the thing have you got everything, all your ducks in a row to make sure that this is going to work? Because if you get one that falters, that's enough to throw everything off course. And I think that's the part that maybe people don't understand, is across the board, wherever it is in the funnel, if you don't have one of them, everything lined up correctly, that's enough for people to be disinterested, to jump off side, to not pay attention, so, and that's inevitably what marketers are trying to do. They're trying to grab your attention for that fraction of time. So if you give them a reason to jump up, they will do it. So, that's, I know it's quite broad and it's simplistic, but it is the thing that we've seen consistently over the years. And that is from small to big businesses. Yeah. It's not understanding that these individual silos that you're looking after have to support each other. And if they're not, it will inevitably fail.
Yeah. Gotcha. Are there any specific tactical things other than trying to go too far when you haven't done the right things in the beginning, specific tactical, actions that any clients have been bringing to you that you're keen to guide them away from? So any sorts of flashy, new, shiny thing that is going on in the marketing world that some clients find that they'll bring to you and say, I want to do this. And other than, some things just don't fit for certain industries. Just like I read a thing where there was a stationery group that were trying to convince people through Facebook ads, and none of the people that they were advertising to cared about stationery. So, are
yeah,
there things like that?
I think it's been really, really honest with yourself of what you do. I think people we get caught up in the idea of, like I mentioned earlier, is that narrative. There's a stage of people are doing a lot around sustainability at the moment, and kind of trending topics that they know are very, very popular. But are they necessarily presenting themselves on what they're doing in that area correctly beside it, like as in telling a narrative that is completely ridiculous to the whole situation? Do you know, as in, I'm now after losing an example in my head, but it was, I know it's to do with an automotive company and how they placed themselves with technology, or, I know there was a food brand and in relation to the LGBTQ because of pride. And these are fantastic things like sustainability and, equality and stuff like that are fantastic things to promote. But there's also times where people are just jumping on bandwagons. Yes. Because they know they need to, because that's the trending topic, but it doesn't actually necessarily mean anything. I would think that, especially from the scale of these companies now that I'm talking about, like this is the large multinationals, the conglomerates I'm talking about, whereas internally they need to support people from an equality perspective, and you don't necessarily need to put out an advertisement around certain areas. Some of it's great, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't do it, but I think there's often budget thrown at stuff that doesn't necessarily drive a particular goal or have an actual reason to it. It's just done. Do you know, it's done for the sake of it, and they don't actually care about the topic, or they don't really mind what happens. They're just like, just do it to tick a box. Will you just show that we're doing that? And I think that's often budgets can be wasted. You know, if you're a company that's selling stationery, for example, like you putting out an ad to do with LGBTQ equality or around pride may not necessarily be the right thing to do. Do you know, that's a complete overlay of the whole situation. Like I'm putting that to an extreme, but it's the same idea. Are people just jumping on bandwagons for the sake of it? And are they actually thinking about the goal of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve? I don't know necessarily, if every company's doing that. No, let's be honest. It's pretty safe to say that no, not every company does know why they're doing it. Yeah. They're just doing it. And I think that they're the kind of the funny things that people jump on. It's people used to jump on different things like, I want an app. You're like, why do you want an app? There's no reason for you to have an app. You're a construction company. Do you know, sort of thing? And social media is the same sort of thing. I think slowly but surely people are changing in that set. People are starting to ask questions, or they're trying to wonder where all that revenue went to and that they pumped into social media, even though it wasn't right for their business model. But I think now it's actually campaigns that people are wasting certain money on. Do you know, as in like they're just jumping on a bandwagon, throwing money at it, and there's no real reason to do it. Like if you care about equality or you care about sustainability, that's fine. You can promote yourself doing that. But sometimes the narratives that go with those are a little bit suspect, and it doesn't actually seem very genuine. And therefore, if it doesn't seem genuine and you're not actually trying to do something positive with it, then I just don't see the point. That would be my take on the whole thing. Yet again, it's kind of that marketing consistency that's been happening over the last few years. But before that, it was like jumping on the shiny thing. Like people would now mention TikTok. TikTok is the new Vine. Yeah. Could be gone, could be great over the next while, but people are asking for, like they were asking for Snapchat specialists and TikTok specialists and stuff. Yeah. It's like, well, they haven't been around long enough to really have a specialist in it, is there? So, there's always been those cases, and there will always be them going forward. The new shiny thing will be great, but, I know you, for example, like AI is everywhere. And some people are like, yeah, we're going to invest heavily in AI. You're like, yeah, to do what? Chatbots. We need chatbots. You're like, why do you need chatbots? You need your customer service done correctly. You need someone actually on the other end of that chat. So there's those sort of mistakes that are made. And yet again, that goes from marketing. Like people see marketing as social media advertising. Some people see it as the big billboard outside. Whereas like the best form of advertising could be your customer service. You know, are people going onto your website and going into your intercom or your Pubble chatbot down the bottom, asking a question? And are they actually talking to a human? Like, do they need to talk to someone back in an office who's asking a legitimate question? And does that help you turn over? And then if that's the case, then great. But I think it's, people jump at shiny new things and they don't necessarily think about why or what they're trying to achieve from the whole thing, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. What surprised you the most after you started Trigger Media? What did you have to do, or what did you have to care about that you didn't know? Completely unexpected areas that you had to deal with.
It sounds a bit extreme, but the kind of bureaucratic side of it, the paperwork, the simple filing for stuff, keeping on top of revenue and taxes and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of work that needs to go into that, and keeping on top of things. I would have one piece of advice for people if they are thinking of starting up or they're at the start. Allow people to do what they're good at. I'm not a numbers guy. Actually, weirdly enough, no, don't put me in charge of our accounts, basically, because it's just not what gets me going. I'm not interested. I obviously am interested, but I'm not interested in doing those books and doing that sort of stuff. I'm going to struggle to concentrate. I'll be honest, it's just who I am. But some people it's okay with. My business partner, Paddy, he's good with numbers, really good with numbers. Now, weirdly enough, when it comes to analytics and marketing, I'm actually really interested, but which kind of contradicts itself, but it's just strange. I find it interesting. Maybe it's because the action was taken, so I see the result. The money side of things just bores me to death. So, I think we try to do our books and we try to do that sort of stuff ourselves, and you can keep on top of it. But when it's nagging in the top of your head and it feels like such a weight on your shoulders, maybe offloading that weight for €150 a month or €250 a month to someone is probably the better option, because that's what they do. They can do it with their eyes closed, but I'm like that pressure and that stress is worth €250 to your accountant or to a financial service company just to get that done. And I think there's times where people will, well, I don't have enough going on and I'm just going to be busy for the sake of busy, or I'm going to do all this sort of stuff. And there's those sort of people. And then there's the others that are literally bogged down with client work, which we were at one stage, like as in we had too much client work and then we had all of these other things to do on top of everything else. And that's just a lot of stress when all you should be focusing on is just doing the best job. But like I don't believe I'm saying this piece of advice now and I wouldn't have listened to it 3 years ago. I would have listened to it. I just wouldn't have done anything. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I think there's certain mistakes people have to make, or like some people will make the mistakes that I've made. Some people will have made some good decisions, hopefully, maybe. Yeah. But I'll have made some good decisions that other people will have made mistakes on, and I'll have made mistakes too. So there's kind of a give and take there that I now look back on, and realize. But, I would think that if there's stuff that is out there that is just so stressful to you that you cannot comprehend doing, and it's generally around that accountancy, the tax, that bureaucratic admin side of things, if that's not who you are, then I would get it off your case. And it's quite easy to. That's a solution to it is just get someone to do your numbers. It's quite simple. And I think it relieves a lot of stress, especially right at the start, because that's something that kind of creeps up on you. You know, you'd be doing a piece of work and you get to Friday and you're like, oh God, I have to do that thing now again, you know, sort of. So that was one area I think I pretended to know that I knew it was going to be busy and we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, but it's just not the case. Like you don't forget. Maybe deep down you choose to forget, sort of thing, you know, like if I'm being really honest with myself, it is what it is. So yeah, there's kind of those small things. And then, the other side of it was working on the business and in the business. I think even to this day, one of the main things that, so I've two other business, so it's Paddy is my business partner. He's the head of technology. There's Peter, who's the head of creative. And I think for us, our big thing going forward is learning to work on the company more than we work in the company. Yeah. That's the goal that we have to get ourselves to. We'll always be working in the business, especially for the next 12 months. We'll definitely be in the business, but the goal has got to be for us to be always working on the business and to step out of the day-to-day tasks of it, because the business just cannot grow without someone working on it rather than in it. And I think for a long period of time, when the business was in the old business model, we worked in it rather than on it. And that's a very, very hard thing to do. It's unsustainable, realistically. It would just make things very, very difficult, because
you just become a collection of freelancers.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And it just means that there's peaks and troughs. Realistically, it's you get in a project, you're delighted, then you have to work on that project. And then when the project finishes, you're like, uh-oh, where's the next thing coming from? And it's not to that extreme. You are always thinking and trying to get in business. It isn't as simple or as silly as that. But it does get to a stage where a week creeps past you and you haven't done anything to maybe grow the business. You've just been focusing on getting that project right for the client, which is lovely and great for the client, but not necessarily for your business. So they were the two kind of main areas or the biggest lessons that I learned. If there's something that stresses you, try and get it off your plate in some way, shape or form. If there's someone in the business to do that, let's do it. But there's also a case of you need them doing the thing that they're best at as well. So I think that was one major lesson. The other one was, just basically making sure that, I don't know, no time is not actually waste is definitely the wrong word there. It's not too much time is put inside it rather than actually on the business. You can get yourself down a rabbit hole of just peaks and troughs, highs and lows. That's not a good place to be honest. So trying to find yourself that steady revenue while providing the value and putting in all that work, but try and think with your head up rather than your head down. Because we had ourselves in a place where all heads were down, and that's not a good place to be, because you just can't see what's coming forward,
Yeah. What do you see as, say, the next 8 to 12 months? What's that look like for you guys?
8 to 12 months, good question. To be honest, I think we have in our head that idea of continuing to grow to a stage where we aren't. It kind of just pushes back on that point there, is getting to a place where I know my role and Paddy and Peter's role will change at different rates, basically. But the role is to work on the business rather than in it, get out and get into the meeting rooms more often than you're not in meeting rooms, basically to get in the business that we require, to get to where we want to be, the business that we've all pictured, So, the next 6, 8, 12 months is short term is predominantly actually a lot of project work that the team has at the moment. A lot of it is around content. So we've got those projects, making sure we execute on them. But my head has to remain firmly up. I'm going to force my chin to look up because, I just don't want to repeat the same mistakes. I get infuriated when I make the same mistake twice. And look, I've done it before, but it's just, yet again, it takes a really long time to look back and know when you were being an absolute muppet. Let's be honest. So, and sometimes you need to trip over yourself a couple of times before you kind of wake yourself up, or, my girlfriend could tell me, or the family could tell me, be like, did you think about this thing? And it kind of clicks with you again. You're like, you're after making the same mistake again, sort of. But it happens. It is what it is. And you need to maybe not be too hard on yourself. I was pretty hard on myself when I made the same mistake again. So, like, they could be small mistakes, like really, really simple mistakes. It could be from how to approach a client who may be being difficult, or trying to stretch the scope of a project, and X, Y, and Z. So those sort of things are stuff that we've, especially in the last, even since the start of this year, we've really started to iron out the processes, the structure that we need to provide to ourselves, because look, we're definitely not perfect, but things are in a really good place, in the sense that we're bringing in projects. We know times and dates. We know the process things need to go through from proposal to executing, that side of things. And I think, if we continue to make them quicker and efficient, it means that doing our job and getting in more business is going to be a lot easier going forward. And I think they're the mistakes that sometimes people make, is where you start something, you don't really commit to it. You start it again, start a new system, scrap it all, go again, go back to the old system, all of these crazy things that you try and do. But it's kind of just choosing a process, stick to it and get consistent. And I think that consistency is what we're going to try and provide ourselves over 12 months is let's get ourselves to a consistency from, like project work to the types of projects that we want in to revenue to everything else in between, the processes and systems. Things will chop and change. Look, I'm not going to pretend like they're not going to, but it just means that we kind of take our plan, stick to it and know that like everything that's gone before us, the decisions that we're making now going forward are based off previous hiccups realistically. And we know that that's the wrong way to go. So look, we're making more informed decisions. I think that's the best way to put it. Like, so 12 months, I don't know exactly. And I don't think I'm willing to say exactly how it's going to go because I don't necessarily know, but, I know that we're in a very, very good place, but it's more so, playing with a head up and knowing that we can kind of change and move. We're still small, so we can still turn on a whim and change things if we need to. But it's the kind of fundamental platform that we set for ourselves now. The previous business model and company and stuff like that was one platform. And on top of that, now we've got the kind of refreshed brand. We have the processes we want to follow, our software, like our software choices that we like to use and all that sort of stuff. And then from actually running the business perspective, we've learned a million and one lessons realistically. So I think over the next 12 months, it's consistency is what we want to provide ourselves. It's everything else is actually in place. And I think that's what gives me the smile on my face at the moment, because 12 months ago it wasn't necessarily because there was a little bit more ambiguity about the whole thing. You know, you're kind of you're still figuring things out and the head was still a little bit too down, you know, as in looking into projects and stuff like that. So yeah, there's kind of, we've small tactical goals and we know what our projections are and what our goals are and stuff like that. But if it's a very simplistic way to put things, consistency, that's what we want to provide to ourselves over 12 months. It's nothing more or less than that, but that's a simplistic term for a very complicated way of doing things. So, but yeah, no, that's pretty much, that's the goal is consistency. We haven't had it. We're having it this year, but, prior to this, we didn't. And it's something that once we started to get a hold of it, we were like, okay, we're not losing that, you know, sort of thing. It's, kind of put another like fire in the belly sort of stuff, you know.
Do you have a long-term grand vision of what Trigger Media will be, you know, in 5-10 years? Or do you have any sorts of thoughts on potential exits in the future? Or what do you see as your...
Yeah, I think, I've always had a picture in my head what that company, look, I've mentioned earlier on, I'm big into sport. And I've always loved team sports over individual sports. And that's why I've always loved, I really, really enjoyed both Facebook and Web Summit because of the people around me. But, it was particularly evident in Web Summit, the idea of team and growing a team, especially because it was a young team. They're a very, very young team in Web Summit. And it was like you were building it together. It was a group effort. It was, and I'm starting to learn to reflect on things and know that that's what actually drives me. They're the things that I enjoy. My old business partner would have been very good at identifying those things with me because that's what he did. So, it was good to kind of learn about myself and what drives me. And that's where these visions of this inevitable company, the inevitable company is basically a one-stop shop digital agency where people can come to us with issues in any one of our areas, but can essentially come to us for all of them. And like size and scale, who knows? I'd love to take it international and beyond, but it's, one of those ones where I've learned not to get too far. Like I picture that, let's say you could picture that every day, and that's a lovely thought, but I think you kind of think of that right in the early months of setting up the business. I know that that's what I pictured. And I was like, yeah, we'll get there in 12, 15 months sort of thing. Kidding myself, like completely kidding myself, like completely lying, not knowing how I actually got there. Whereas, look, I'm 3 years in. I'm not 30 years in. I'm not pretending like I know everything now, but the amount that I've learned in 3 years is phenomenal. So I can now start to see the smaller steps that it would take to get to that business to scale, where WeWork are hating every second of a conversation with me because I'm like, you got more office space? That's where I'd love to be. But there's knowing the steps to get there, the idea of running a business and then getting in place the right kind of structures for each area of the business. That's sort of stuff that wouldn't have even entered my head, I don't believe, 3 years ago. And if it did, it was very brief. Yeah. It was in and out. So there is a big picture idea. And it's the same for Peter and Paddy. It's what made us click, is that we picture that one company that people can come to trust and know that there is somebody within the walls of that company, whatever that looks. That could be metaphorical walls, because who knows the way businesses are run now. There could be people in different countries and stuff like that, but you're going to be able to get an answer to that issue, with anything that involves your marketing online or tech or creative or whatever it may be. So yeah, that's yet again, I laugh at myself because I try to make it sound simple. But I know that it's really complicated. Whereas maybe previously when I made it sound very simple, I thought it was simple. Whereas now I know it's not. So, I think it's a lot clearer to myself, Paddy and Peter, what the steps would be to get to where we actually want to go to. But you only really learn them from the previous mistakes that we've made and everything in between. Look, I myself and yourself spoke just before we came on this and said, I think people look back retrospectively thinking they knew what they were doing and they just made decisions. I think people just make decisions, and whether they work or they don't, it's very simple. And you'll either learn that they work or they don't. But either way, you have to make a decision. I think people kind of pretend like they knew what they were doing, and they're making this decision based off God knows what they say. They've made it all from data to intuition to I'm an entrepreneur since birth sort of stuff. But yeah, I think it's just one of those things where we have kind of a joint vision on where we want to go with things. And yeah, we're kind of just now all starting to know exactly, no, I take that back. We're starting to see the steps a little bit more clearly, on how we want it to go, as in how we want it to run it and where we want to take it and what we can do with it. But I think we're also not silly enough to stamp something down and say, this is exactly how it's going to go. Because I think if you stick to that too rigidly, you're also in for trouble, Oh,
absolutely.
Especially in kind of technology and marketing and creative, that sort of stuff. Like if you're not able to change or I'm going to use dynamic, which is another kind of buzzword, but if you're not able to change, then what are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the things that, like the business models and tools and technologies don't even exist yet for some of the things that we will be doing in the future, just because of the way the world changes.
Absolutely.
There's no way to know 100% of what reality will be like. Just looking at for what you were.
Yeah, like even on top of that, like you even mentioned like AI and chatbots and those new developments. Like people, at one stage, like when were people like, did people stop talking about AR and VR and everything in between? At one stage there was just a big massive explosion of this is the future, Oculus is everything and stuff. Unbelievable technology. It's really, really cool. It's going to be fantastic in the future. But like, is it accessible to everyone? What would they use it for? Like, will they actually get a benefit out of it? Or do people still like to just sit in front of their TV and play PlayStation or do whatever, So I think, I read a fantastic book called Digital Darwinism by an author called Tom Goodwin. And now he's in media himself. He's very, very clued in, but he discussed the idea that we are changing at a decent rate, but we're not changing as fast as we think we're changing. Things haven't actually revolutionized over like a very short period of time. It's going to take a long time before things. I discussed with my friends the idea of the self-driving car, and people are like, yeah, we're going to all be in self-driving cars by 2022. I'm like, no, we won't. And they'd be asking, Ryan, that's silly. Look, they're already in California. I'm like, yeah, but they have to go through a lot of legal issues and a lot of policy and all that sort of stuff to even get in a chance to do it. And then everyone has to buy one, sort of thing. So like, not everyone's in an electric car yet, but it's the most logical thing to do. So.
Well, it's just like, I was talking to somebody this morning about Uber here in Dublin. I I opened the app one time and there were like 2 cars. I mean, I don't even know if
it's a taxi. It's our taxis.
Yeah.
They're not legally allowed. So there you go. That's a great example. So Uber aren't allowed in Ireland. Well, they are allowed in Ireland, but there are taxi drivers because our taxi drivers kicked off saying, hold on a second, we've spent all these monies. This is a good few years ago, whereas like we've spent money on taxi medallions and now you've made them really cheap. And now you're going to tell me any Joe Soap can be a taxi man? No. That can't be the case. So it was only legal for taxi men to be professional drivers in that sense. So yeah, it's an excellent point. But so there's even one small issue with one tech company. Like we think things are moving on, but they're not moving on that fast. So maybe that's why I think that like I always go back to fundamental and basics and getting like ducks in a row and making sure that everything kind of pulls its own weight sort of stuff, because that's the stuff that will always kind of be there, like following simple processes and structures and stuff like that to make sure that everything kind of runs smoothly. There's no real kind of hiccups in whatever you're using, like as in whether it's good, bad or indifferent, at least get everything that works like efficient and actually working. Whereas some people will like sprint to really complicated things and half of them don't work. And it's like, that's a lot of money spent for not a huge amount of return sort of thing. And I think that's, one thing that over the next few years, you're absolutely right in saying we don't know the future and what way things are going to be built. But whatever those things are being built, it's going to take a really long time before these things like significantly impact our lives, So like Elon Musk taking people to Mars, to everything like as something as extreme as that, to the small new app that's going to be absolutely brilliant. These things take time, and it's kind of like, don't overestimate what happens in a year. Don't underestimate don't underestimate what'll happen in 10. It's kind of like, it can happen in 10 years, but it's not going to happen in a year, So I think that's yet again, I don't know whether or not I'm right in saying that this is where my train of thought came from. I genuinely don't know, but it's kind of focusing on what are the consistencies to everything. And I would recommend anybody to read that book, Digital Darwinism, because it taught me a lot it gave a reflective view of the different revolutions out, the Industrial Revolution to electricity to everything in between, basically saying that this is how long these things took. And they built them incorrectly because it was electricity was built on top of everything from the Industrial Revolution. Whereas if they had started from scratch, they would have completely changed their whole system. They would have scrapped everything and changed the way in which things worked, but they were just building on top of old systems. So at the moment, we're probably still building on top of older systems, if that makes sense. So it's kind of, some people need to take it back, go back to the basics and see what's the best and most efficient and effective way to do what they want to do. And it'll be interesting to see that's one big thing I think people over the next few years will have to come to grips with, is the fact that things are moving fast. Yes, but they're not moving as fast as you think they are. So kind of peel it back a little bit and get your fundamentals right before you go too far. Then if you get them right, reach for the stars, do what you want. But I think there's a funny little stage that we're in that people are like, we don't have a functioning website, but we want to use AI. Okay. All right. Interesting. Yeah, exactly. So it's very interesting time.
Our chatbot can talk to our AI. Just nobody can get to the website.
Yeah. You don't have an SSL cert in your website, sir. Okay.
Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you think is key to understanding you or Trigger Media or your startup journey?
No, I suppose from setting up a business perspective, I think I haven't been in that technology sector, since Facebook, but that doesn't really particularly count. That was an predominantly operations role. So, but if you are setting up a business or you're 1 year in or whatever it may be, do focus on like there's things that you learn in a degree or you learn like anybody could tell you, your grandfather could have told you, is like, they ask you the questions that people don't want to be asked, where it's like, how much money are you making? Yeah, no, but we got investment instead. And if you have a conversation with somebody in technology, it's almost like investment and revenue are the same thing. If you're doing technology or like a technology startup or whatever, maybe look, I'm speaking from a place not of experience. It's just kind of maybe some observations, but if you're going to start a business, think about revenue before anything else. Like as in, yes, take on investment. If it's a tech company, you need investment. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but there has to be there has to be a very, very, very clear focus on making revenue, because every business, if you're not making revenue, you're not actually a business, you know? So I think some people forget that, and they're like, yeah, we got $100,000 to start up, and now we're going to go into this fancy office. We're going to fill it with bean bags, and everyone's going to get a free can of Coke, and it's going to be great. And it's like, cool, but how are you making money? And they don't ask that question. Facebook have bought WhatsApp, and obviously they can play a data play on things, but like, they're still struggling to find a way to make money off WhatsApp. They will. I'm sure they'll just charge us at some point or whatever it may be. But those sort of things, like Snapchat, would they sell themselves to Facebook now if it was a few years ago again? Definitely, because they're really struggling to find ways to make revenue. And I think even if you're not in the tech sector, if you're similar to myself, where you want to set up an agency or you want to be a consultant or whatever it may be, focus on revenue and figure out a very clear idea on how you want to make your money, because people don't focus on that enough. They focus on the really nice, sexy things to focus on, the new logo, the website and all that. Look, that's prior to the website. I'm talking about websites, marketing and creative, but if your fundamental business plan isn't clear and you're not really sure on what you're supposed to be doing, then creating a website, doing marketing, doing all that sort of stuff is actually going to be an exercise in futility. So I think that's one maybe major lesson for people to learn, would be to really think about how you want to approach making your money. What are your margins? Look, I haven't got this perfect. We definitely don't have this perfect, but it's something that we've learned a lot of over the last 3 years. And I think it's something for people to really focus on, because if you think the $100,000 is going to last long, or if you've any sort of it's just not. And then you're sitting with a lot of people asking you questions that you can't answer because you've never thought of them before. And when you did think about them, you just kind of made up a fluffy answer. A lot of people make up fluffy answers. We're just going to get this contract and we're going to do this thing. And it just doesn't work out that way. So yeah, I think from a running the business perspective, it's one piece of insight I would give is put a heavy emphasis on earning money. I mentioned earlier, it was about an accountant and using your accountant. We have a fantastic accountant. I'll give them a plug. It's Cronin's. But they've been brilliant, because you can discuss with them actually running the business. They're, from a numbers perspective, they understand the area that I don't particularly enjoy doing. And I can just discuss the idea of growing a business and using like that person who's in a position of like kind of knowledge or whatever it may be that you may not be in, and give a different angle on things. So we utilize our accountant. And I think it's just really, really important to be able to discuss the numbers and figure out exactly, right, if we've got 3 departments to our company, how is each one of them going to make money? Do we know what services sit within them? And then are we getting better? I'll be honest, we don't have it perfect, but are we getting better at accurately estimating how much time stuff takes? Because generally in agency world, it's based on hours spent doing things. And I can tell you now, not one project I've ever done has come in at the time that you estimated at, ever. Yeah. Just doesn't work. And that's a disservice that was definitely a disservice to us. Of course I'm biased in saying this, but we are good at our jobs, but we've not got the return for it at all. And that's me. That's definitely on my chin there, that I have to take that, because that's important for me to learn as fast as I can, so that we are definitely getting the return for the work that we put in, from the quality and experience that we provide, but even just the hours put in is just something that people make a mistake on. So I think that's something that you're constantly always going to, all right, I'm not going to pretend like that won't be in it. You could talk to me in 10 years time, Dave, and I could still be saying the same thing. Yeah, we're still trying to figure that out.
Oh,
but
it's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably, for software development, it's one of the hardest things. The 2 hardest things are estimating time and naming variables.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've started trying to double and add 20%, and that's still never right.
No.
I don't know. I don't know anyone who's ever gotten that right.
Yeah, I don't think it is. And I think I'll speak from an agency perspective, and even just my knowledge of just in the Irish agency world, I think people will confidently always say, yeah, we got this right. And they'll come back and their hair will be in a mess and there'll be bags under their eyes. They'll be like, yeah, we did not get that right whatsoever. And I think it's just a consistency. And look, it's something that people will constantly try and learn. And look, as a company grows, your resources change, your costs change, and therefore your pricing may need to change. You know, all of these things are massive factors. And if your company's growing and you're going after or if you're trying to provide change or you're trying to do something, everything affects your costs. So therefore your pricing's probably going to change, or your estimates are going to change. So you're going to always be looking to kind of get more accurate, to just be better at that area. So it's one thing that I was like, and again, it's one of those ones where I was quite harsh on myself, like, how did I get that so wrong? But it's one of those ones where you have to kind of learn to be okay with, okay, you got that wrong and you were off by 10 hours here, but look, it is what it is. That's your own mistake. Learn by it and go forward. So yeah, it just goes back to the point of earn that money that you probably warrant and deserve. Make sure that you kind of estimate your time out correctly, and then just make sure that you're providing value to the client. But I think if you're doing things correctly in general, you should be providing quality to the client, unless you're completely hoaxing them.
Yeah.
And that may be a % of people. But I think if you're going out to set up a business, obviously you're out there to make money. Everyone is out there to make money. And they should be there to provide value to customers, because realistically, a good entrepreneur or a good business is only going to ever be able to make money if they do a good job. Do you know? So it goes hand in hand. No business is out there not to make money, but it's just one of those ones that keep an eye on it right at early doors, and don't gloss over the facts and the figures that are screaming at you, sort of thing. Don't think it's just going to come good. I remember we made a cash flow years ago, and we made estimates over 12 months. Literally the worst thing I've ever done in my life. They were just the strangest numbers to ever come out. But it was optimism. There was optimism to it, and you're backing yourself, but then you hadn't learned I hadn't learned any of the stuff that I now know. So I was like, well, unless the contract is signed and the revenue's in, well, that's not going in the cash flow. You know, whereas we'd be writing up an Excel sheet and it would literally just have hypothetical, made up, fluffy numbers, and it was what it was. But it was based off optimism and where you wanted to bring it and blah, blah, blah. But we were kind of being a bit silly with the way we approached it. So that's kind of an elongated way to say it, but it was just simply focus on numbers. If it's not really your thing, get people to support you that can help you with those numbers, and then just focus on revenue and just really focus on getting in, work on the company. Obviously you will have to work in it, but work on that company and don't let off. Be relentless with working on the company, because it'll just provide consistency. And we're still looking for that consistency ourselves, but it's a lot more consistent now than it ever was. You know, those peaks and troughs just means really high highs and really low lows. And that's not a good place to be. Provide yourself some security, some consistency, and know how you're going to do it. And yeah, it sounds simple when I put it like that, but yeah, it is what it is.
Nice. So call to action for the listeners.
I don't have a major plug for anything really. It's maybe just to visit our website, triggermedia.ie, if you're interested in some of the work that we've done. We've actually only just launched it there the other day. So, from an SEO perspective, I've no idea where it sits, to be honest, but it should be good enough to find. Yeah. So it's triggermedia.ie, to find out more about the work that we've done. And if you want to, connect with me or reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. It's just Ryan Hopkins. You'll be able to very easily find my big fat blonde head, you know. So, it's easy able to find me on LinkedIn.
Cool. I'll add all of your details in the show notes.
Great.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thanks a million.
And thank you all for listening. Until next time, remember, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.